I believe Wayne Gretzky's father and my father, and I'm not comparing myself to Wayne Gretzky, far from it as a player, but on the knowledge side of the game, I will do that, though.
You're listening to Down Home Corner. Down Homers, we're all connected. Remember to visit our website, downhomecorner.com. Hear our latest shows and past podcasts, too. To find out more about being a sponsor on the show, leave your info on our contact page. Now, back to our show with John Paris Jr., author of the book, They Called Me Chocolate Rocket. Fascinating book, fascinating life.
Montreal Canadiens signed me as a junior, and that's how I left Windsor and went to school in Montreal. The Montreal Canadiens brought me there. I was signed by Scotty Bowman was their head scout at the time, but I had four of the six NHL teams came. They were all by letters. The fifth one was the Montreal. They sent someone to the house, which was Bowman. So I had a choice of 5 of the 6 teams at the time to sign with and go to camp. So that's how that all happened. And I played the first year between the Junior Canadiens and Maisonneuve in Junior A. So that's the start.
Well, I can imagine how proud your father must have been when Scotty Bowman shows up at your door.
Yes, well, the Scotty Bowman, Montreal Canadiens, Montreal, Toronto, Boston were the teams in Windsor. That's what everyone would talk about. So Montreal was, I would say, the Canadian team number 1, and then Toronto number 2, Boston would be number 3, and the choices of the families or the fans. But when, Scotty Bowman, when he showed up, I had to go home and leave school and go home to meet him. He came there twice, and the second time I was down at the ballpark. So it was quite an event. But my dad had a great time discussion. Actually, the two of them, when I've seen Scotty Bowman over the years later on, the first question, how's your dad?
Very cool.
He has a formidable memory. Oh, yes, very good. So that's the way that happened.
What did it feel like the first time that first blade hit the ice in the Montreal Forum?
I guess it probably, I had a wake-up call the first time I got off the train in Montreal. I was with Normie Ferguson, who later played with Minnesota. Normie and I were both playing in Montreal, and we had Brian O'Byrne. And Darryl Maxwell out of Toronto was also there. Darryl didn't go back and stay, but we were all on the trip together with a scout from Prince Edward Island who was escorting us. He was being the dad figure. So the wake-up call was seeing all the amount of people in the Windsor Station. It's called the Windsor Station where you arrived at that time. And that was it. But when we arrived to the Forum to put our equipment on, et cetera, and so forth, to try on and everything, your knees shook. I mean, you were walking into the temple of hockey. So the Montreal Forum, something that you, as a youth, you saw that, but you never believed you would be there because it's not like a lot of people think. You didn't play hockey with a dream of playing in the National Hockey League. I didn't do that. I played hockey because that's what we did.
In the book, it was like taking me back to my childhood hockey days as a fan. You know, I mean, you're talking about names like Jacques Lemaire and then my idol, Yvan Cournoyer. These guys were all looking for a job same time you were.
Yes, well, you see, Jacques had played in the Sheen the year before. Well, certain the guys that were there, Stephen, were Serge Savard, Carl Vadnais, Germain Gagnon, Rogie Vachon. I could go on and on. Lemaire, Cournoyer. We could Jules Drouin, Christian Bordelot. It's just mind-boggling the number of players who were at camp and and you became just part of the group. That's all. And when we see each other over the years, as time goes by, it's just like you fall back into the same. It's like you were together every day, because that's something hockey provides. But when you walk into the Montreal Forum and you saw Carry the Lamp, or you could see the pictures, et cetera. The Forum was special, very special. Actually, when they closed the Forum, it was a sad day. It was kind of left a little tingling in the heart because it was an era of my life that was closing down.
For sure. Wasn't Rogie Vachon your roommate?
Rogie was my roommate in Thetford, yes. And his last year junior, he and I were roommates, Rogie. Those were the days when you billeted with a family. And usually if you were like myself, if you were from Nova Scotia, well, you usually billeted with a French family. Over the years, I billeted with an Italian family in Montreal. I billeted with a French family. So I was able to adjust to the languages at that time.
You had also had a number of encounters with a number of Hall of Famers and people that a lot of us as hockey fans would remember. Toe Blake was one of them, and Maurice Richard. That was a very touching part of the book.
Well, Toe Blake was the first one who sort of mentioned to me about to make sure that I just didn't think if I didn't make it as a player that I could possibly have a probability of entering coaching. He said because the way he had put it, the word was that I was directing traffic while I was playing on the ice surface. So he said, you seem to have a good eye for the game. Do not let anyone tell you can't coach or you can't play. And that was fine. But the Rocket, yeah, he was special. In those days, it was Mr. Richard or Mr. Blake. The Rocket was president of our junior team at the same time. And I wasn't well, and he knew it somehow, and he sort of took a liking to me. And every once in a while, he'd go by and he would stop and ask me how I was doing, and he would slip a $2 bill. And those days, they would have had $2 bills, and he would give me a couple of dollars and put that in my pocket, and he'd tell me, "You do not say anything. Keep being quiet." So I wouldn't say anything to anyone about it. A lot of people were surprised to see how he would always come and talk with me. When I would go to the forum, etc., he also, what was amazing about the Rocket was the fact that he was a lot more sensitive than a lot of people can believe. You see, because if you looked at him, he seemed to be very cold. And I was fearful of him because he had that stare and he seemed to be more of a person that you'd not approachable until completely different with me. Completely different. He was kind. He always took the time to talk to me. Always took the time to make sure I was all right. And that was quite and one day he had told me, he said, "I know." And I just sort of looked at him. He said, I know. And he said, "How do you feel?" And I told him, "Well, it's not too well." I said, they keep saying that I had the flu or something. He said, "You take care." He said, "You have your breakfast?" I said, "Well, I didn't eat today. I couldn't eat." And he said, "You have to have something." So he made sure I had bacon and eggs, et cetera, and so forth that morning. But he would always check on me and always slip a couple of dollars. And in those days, the NHL players, if they were coming off the injury list, et cetera, would come and practice with us. So the Pocket Rocket, Henri, would come. And we wouldn't bother Henri as Henri Richard, because Henri very quiet. So we would sit there and get dressed. But he would tell us on the ice surface, he'd go out and play with us the same as he was playing in an NHL game. There was he didn't give you any quarter. But he also would direct traffic, et cetera, and so forth. And one day the Rocket told me, he said, "You play with my brother." He said, "You skate very well." I saw, and I was proud of that. And on our team, we had Guy Lapointe, for example. He was with me at that time. Guy never spoke a word of English. We used to have Jean-Claude Tremblay, Claude Provost, Gilles Tremblay. The players would come and practice with us. And I knew Jacques Laperriere and all the other players anyways. The Rocket owned a tavern at that time also. I wasn't allowed to go. I wasn't of age. But my coach used to go there, Hervé Lalonde. But you would meet a lot of Gump Worsley, for example, he was a nice person, always jovial. Jean Beliveau, that's where I met him. That's how we stayed friends right up to his death. Well, I believe that you're aware of that. We spoke at a couple of events together. I was also his honorary captain at his when he in Halifax, St. Mary's University, when he had his honorary doctor's degree presented to him, was there. So with him there, also Jean Beliveau the reason why we didn't do hockey schools together, because he would say, Johnny, I can't do a hockey school with you. I'd like to work and help you with your hockey school, but if I do yours and I'd have to do others, and I can't refuse others, so I won't be able to do yours. So he said, any help I can give you, he said, just I'll give you some pictures or things like that. But you could call any player in those days, and they would call you back. John Beliveau would call everybody, but any player that you wanted to talk to, whether it be regardless of who. And I became close to Doug Harvey, of course. That story is in the book. And I used to sit with him later on when he was scouting at the end of his career. But there was a mind of hockey, very, very, very mindful. He had a problem with alcohol at the time, but he was a very nice person, an outstanding hockey player, probably one of the best I've ever seen. But the Rocket was the one who made the difference, I believe, when it comes to believing in what you can do. Because when the Rocket tells you, "I know," and we know, a lot of people misunderstand. The Rocket did not have it that easy.
No.
When he was a player, they gave him a dusty time, and he suffered a lot of prejudice, and he didn't have much. He had to fight more, and he was fiery, so he was going to stand his ground. But a lot of insults, and that's the way it was back then.
I'm glad you brought that up, too, because I wanted to ask if you thought maybe a soft spot he might have had for you is because he could relate to the prejudice, even though, yours was as a black player and his was, of course, as a French player. So, I'd wondered if that was, the bond that really kind of tied the two of you together in that way.
I think so. I think part of it, and the fact that he would say, "You don't back up." He'd say, "You don't back up. There's no backing up for it." And he would use us. And I'm looking, and I'm 5'5" and a quarter. So back then, when you were with the Rocket, I was 7 feet tall.
I'll bet.
You're listening to Down Home Corner